From incredible political foresight to astonishing technological experiments of the future, the legendary The Simpsons have continued for many years to amaze the entire world with their unexpected predictions. It seems that each episode of this animated show contains surreal prophecies that later begin to come true in reality with astonishing accuracy. We invite you to immerse yourself in a series of strange, captivating, and at times frightening stories in which The Simpsons allegedly hinted at global conflicts, technological disasters, and sometimes even the very end of the world. And all of this happened long before we started noticing similarities to real events. Stay with us until the very end, because that is where the most unbelievable coincidences lie. Coincidences that can truly blow your mind. Once, in an old episode, The Simpsons good-naturedly made fun of the panic around a possible Third World War. Homer woke the family in the middle of the night, shouting that the conflict was already unfolding, and pushed them into a makeshift shelter. At first glance, it seemed like a typical comedic gag. But today, when you look around, you see far more reasons for anxiety. Geopolitical tension, regular clashes of interests among major powers, and constant reciprocal sanctions. Such a storyline in the modern world no longer seems like mere fiction for laughs. It is enough to recall how quickly local conflicts escalate, drawing in new countries and sometimes even threatening to grow into something global. The rapid development of weaponry, including robotic systems and smart weaponry based on artificial intelligence, also adds fuel to the fire. After all, history teaches us that new conflicts can flare up almost unexpectedly. So, Homer's joke looks amusing on the surface, but with time, makes us wonder more and more whether we are actually getting closer to such a scenario in reality. In one of the episodes, a character appears who invents a device that decodes a baby's crying and converts it into articulate speech. In the cartoon, this is played for laughs and sometimes even seems absurd. Yet the very idea of such technology feels genuinely revolutionary. After all, the challenge of understanding small children has always been, and remains, relevant for all of humanity. Interestingly enough, today scientists and neurolinguistics experts are exploring machine learning algorithms capable of analyzing the tonality and frequency characteristics of an infant's cry. Considering the successes of modern programs that recognize human speech, a breakthrough is possible. One day, parents might use a special application that picks up on the nuances of a baby's crying, distinguishing hunger, pain, or tiredness. Even now, some countries are testing smart gadgets that can quickly determine why a child is crying, based on recorded signals from hundreds of families. If this field continues to advance, the day may come when The Simpsons' ideas become part of our everyday reality. In another well-known episode, the Simpson family visits a hyper-modern amusement park, where all the staff are robots operating on advanced artificial intelligence. The first moments seem ideal. No human errors, everything runs smoothly, and visitors do not have to shuffle along in long lines. But then, a disturbing reality emerges. The machines begin performing tasks differently from what was expected, and eventually rise up against humans. Today, many specialists, including world-renowned experts in computer science, warn of the risks associated with unchecked development of artificial intelligence. This technology can not only automate factories, but also penetrate banking systems, healthcare, educational platforms, and even, looking ahead, the mechanisms of political decision-making. Should a failure or malicious misuse occur, we could face massive problems, anything from economic collapse to a real threat to human life. The Simpsons showcase this in a humorous way, but the underlying issue is far from a joke. The full-length cartoon The Simpsons Movie, which was released in 2007, placed a genuine environmental catastrophe at the center of its plot. According to the storyline, it is Homer, far from the most responsible resident of Springfield, who worsens the pollution of the lake, ultimately prompting drastic government measures. They seal the town under a giant dome so that the waste and toxins cannot escape. Although this plot was presented with the show's trademark irony, it carries a serious message. Uncontrolled human activity can disrupt the natural balance to such an extent that harsh and unprecedented actions become necessary. Given current problems, from massive deforestation to greenhouse gas emissions, it no longer seems outlandish to imagine governments having to adopt extreme solutions. Some megacities have already imposed temporary restrictions on car travel to reduce smog. And who can say if one day we will not actually discuss more global domes or similar constructions to protect territories from the complete destruction of the environment? The episode Marge in Chains from the 4th season is remembered by many with a particular chill. It featured a story about infected goods arriving from Osaka. One of the factory's sick workers sneezed on a package, and the infection spread throughout Springfield. The joke, of course, lampoons paranoia. But in the real world, we know of cases where viruses traveled via airborne and contact routes in mere hours, thanks to modern transportation networks. It only takes one sick passenger on an airplane to create an outbreak at the far end of the world upon arrival. History teaches us how quickly diseases can cross borders. We need only recall real epidemics and their swift journeys between continents. So in this case, The Simpsons addressed a topic that we now certainly do not view as just a gag. The Simpsons have joked repeatedly about Ragnarok and various religious prophecies. In one episode, Homer became so convinced of the apocalypse that he even interpreted certain verses from the Book of Revelation as clear omens of an impending end. He half-jokingly, half-seriously predicted a date when humanity would cease to exist. Despite the comedic style, this idea is an ancient part of culture and beliefs. Talk about the potential collapse of civilization, and a global disaster crops up in different historical eras. It is noteworthy that The Simpsons gave this a grotesque twist. When the end of the world does occur, but only in an alternate storyline, Homer happily heads to heaven, and the absurdity of the situation only underscores how often people find themselves prisoners of their own fears. And even now, there will always be those who look for signs of humanity's doom in any catastrophe, citing biblical texts or scientific hypotheses. One of the concepts in the series involves the characters eating virtual food through special helmets without consuming anything material. This naturally triggers humorous associations, but even now, virtual reality is gaining traction, not only in the gaming industry, but also in culinary projects. Some restaurants offer immersive dining, where chefs create a multimedia show enhanced by aromas and light effects to improve the taste. Furthermore, in several laboratories, scientists are studying technology that tricks taste receptors, attempting to replicate taste sensations using electrical impulses. Although it sounds futuristic, such research is being actively pursued. If it continues and becomes widely available, we can imagine a future, perhaps in a few decades or even sooner, where people can enjoy favorite dishes without actually ingesting any calories. This would radically change our entire concept of eating and might help solve numerous problems, from obesity to resource overuse. One of the boldest speculations in The Simpsons is the appearance of a tiny black hole in the town of Springfield. It begins to grow, sucking in objects and people until it reaches threatening proportions. The storyline comes off as openly fantastic, yet the very idea of microscopic black holes is not entirely impossible. Physicists have debated for many years the theory of whether minuscule black holes could form, for instance, through high-energy processes. There is research about whether such micro-holes might arise during cosmic collisions or under certain conditions in particle accelerators. In practical terms, this is extremely unlikely and does not pose a serious threat to humanity. But The Simpsons gave it a comic twist, visualizing the ultimate nightmare. If such a vortex suddenly started growing, swallowing all living things, and even opened a portal to other worlds. For scientists, these storylines offer a chance to explain why science considers such scenarios almost impossible. For us viewers, it is yet another dose of intriguing fantasy. One of the most famous coincidences linked to The Simpsons is an episode aired in the late 1990s in which Donald Trump holds the office of President of the United States of America. At the time, it looked like a tongue-in-cheek jibe at his image as a business magnate and celebrity showman. Years passed, and that very joke became reality. Donald Trump truly won the election and took the presidential post. This story turned The Simpsons into something of a prophetic show in the public eye. Furthermore, when Trump announced his intention to run once more, viewers immediately recalled the episode that flashed a Trump in 2024 poster. Essentially, the scriptwriters often use well-known figures in various roles for humor. But the coincidence is so striking that the debate continues to this day. Some believe that the creators of The Simpsons simply got lucky, while others are convinced that Hollywood has long been adept at analyzing social trends and making bold predictions from them. When The Simpsons first showed a scene in which Bart receives a holographic message about an upcoming concert, it seemed completely outlandish. Over the years, however, technology startups have begun developing three-dimensional displays capable of transmitting a volumetric image of a remote individual in real time. This type of technology is already being tested for concerts, presentations, and even distance learning. At the moment, everything comes with a huge price tag and is mainly accessible to major corporations and labs. But, as experience shows, any technological innovation eventually becomes cheaper and reaches the masses. If we imagine that, in a few decades, holograms become as commonplace as smartphones or video calls, then yet another predicted detail from The Simpsons will turn out to be an impressively accurate glimpse of the future. Sometimes, The Simpsons jokes seem harmless until you start seeing familiar realities in them. One example is the episode in which Bart, Milhouse, and other kids join a boy band whose hits contain hidden propaganda, encouraging enlistment in the Navy. The song includes a meaningless word that, when played backward, sounds like "Join the Navy." In the real world, the effect of musical propaganda is a frequent topic of discussion among cultural and sociological researchers. During global conflicts, for instance, armies of different countries have released promotional songs or hired pop stars to boost morale. In our day, hidden messages might be embedded in advertisements and political campaigns. So although The Simpsons may exaggerate by hinting at mind manipulation through a catchy tune, the concept is not so removed from real life. In an episode where Lisa Simpson decides to go to space to participate in a mission to colonize Mars, the entire family follows suit because Marge fears for her daughter. It leads to a comedic saga with delayed flights and humorous mishaps. But in recent years, talk of flying to the Red Planet has grown ever louder. Elon Musk, and other innovators claim that establishing a permanent colony there in the coming decades is feasible. The reality is far less amusing, as scientists must solve a vast number of problems, from radiation protection to growing food in harsh conditions. Yet the mere fact that we are seriously discussing interplanetary travel and, potentially, creating our first settlements brings us closer to plots that once seemed purely fictional. The Simpsons, in their light-hearted style, managed to anticipate this. In the episode featuring large, aggressive insects, some viewers immediately perceived a prototype of the so-called murder hornets, which later popped up in real-life news. In reality, these hornets had been found in certain places long before the widespread media buzz, and their danger to humans is not as catastrophic as sensationalist press often implies. However, the reputation of The Simpsons as a show that picks up on future events had its effect, and people remembered the cartoon yet again. Interestingly, some link that same episode to unfortunate helicopter incidents, as though The Simpsons predicted it all. But in most cases, these are merely lucky or unlucky coincidences spurred on by fan theories and the so-called recognition effect in retrospect. Still, these stories only add to the show's aura of mystery, prompting viewers to examine even the simplest scenes under a magnifying lens. When Bart and Lisa peek into the future and see cars floating above the streets, it seems like yet another animator's fantasy. However, advances in transportation are moving so rapidly that there are already companies testing flying cars and air taxis. Admittedly, their prototypes can shift from automobile mode to flight mode, but they require special licenses and cost enormous amounts of money. Proponents of these projects argue that, in the future, once the technology becomes more accessible, it could transform our entire logistics system. Imagine how much city thoroughfares would be relieved if part of the traffic moved into the air. Of course, there are still concerns about safety, sky traffic jams, and infrastructure challenges. But who would have thought even a few decades ago that such a topic would be taken seriously? Once again, The Simpsons depicted a future reality that we no longer dismiss out of hand. The episode in which Lisa creates a solar-powered car only to be hindered by corporate forces perfectly illustrates a conflict we see in real life. Advocates of green energy champion solar panels, wind turbines, and hydrogen fuel, dreaming of a world without emissions. They face opposition from oil and gas giants, whose conventional business is threatened by the switch to new energy. The Simpsons satirically portrays this clash, showing a powerful character literally blocking out the sun with a dirigible, preventing its rays from reaching Lisa's car. This storyline is amusing, but if you think about it, it reflects the fierce competition taking place between the eco-movement and traditional energy industries. One side accuses the other of global pollution, while the other cites economic risks and a lack of ready infrastructure. The discussion could go on forever, but one thing is clear. The future truly does belong to renewable sources, and The Simpsons highlighted this conflict before it became a red-hot topic in global news. Beyond Donald Trump, The Simpsons scriptwriters briefly hinted at the potential political career of his daughter, Ivanka Trump. In one short episode, Homer is shown on screen with a button reading "Ivanka for President 2028," causing a storm of debate. People wondered whether another prophecy might come true, that Ivanka, who had taken on a prominent role during her father's presidency, would follow in his footsteps. Interestingly, after Donald Trump actually came to power, many began to watch Ivanka's moves more closely, whether she would run for office or at least wield significant influence. Indeed, she has performed a series of diplomatic tasks, accompanied her father to international meetings, and is widely considered one of the most influential people in the family. Of course, only time will tell if a real Ivanka for president campaign materializes. But the Simpsons example shows that even the most outlandish satirical gags can one day take on flesh and blood. One of the craziest scenarios in The Simpsons involves most of the residents suddenly turning into zombies after consuming unusual fast food. Maybe it is due to experimental meat or a strange additive in burgers, typical Simpson-style humor, playing on any story that can spark absurd panic. Once the infection spreads through the whole town, only the Simpson family remains sensible enough not to fall victim to it. The real world, of course, has not encountered actual walking dead, but there are viruses capable of dramatically altering an organism's behavior. Parasites that control insect behavior, or toxoplasmosis affecting mammals, are examples of nature's occasional exotic methods of brain manipulation. True, this does not imply that we stand on the brink of a zombie apocalypse, yet The Simpsons, in its usual style, reminds us, never say never. Who can predict the surprises scientific discoveries or botched experiments might hold? Perhaps the most recognizable symbol of strict control in The Simpsons is the gigantic, transparent dome the federal agency uses to cover Springfield in order to stop pollution from spreading. If we peel away the comedy, the idea of a closed city conjures thoughts of strict quarantines and no-go zones where entry and exit are prohibited. In the real world, we have already seen lockdowns when entire neighborhoods or regions were sealed off to contain an infection. Of course, an enormous dome is an exaggeration, but the essence remains the same. Faced with emergencies, governments may resort to any means, including total territorial isolation and communication restrictions. Perhaps the fantastical image from the cartoon is merely the ultimate embodiment of a worst-case quarantine. But given how quickly progress moves and political landscapes shift, who can say whether this ironic picture might one day come closer to reality when the next major crisis hits? So what is this? Sharp observation and bold imagination on the part of the writers? Or random coincidences against the backdrop of predictable trends? Either way, The Simpsons continue to serve as a sort of mirror that reflects society's problems and aspirations. And if at one time we thought all of this was merely fantastic storylines, today's events sometimes prove otherwise. Who knows what other surprises and prophecies are hidden in the upcoming episodes? Thank you for staying with us until the very end. All that remains is to keep a close eye on what else these yellow characters might dream up, because sometimes their jokes have a strangely powerful knack for turning into eerily realistic scenarios. Subscribe to the Top Facts channel for the most incredible collections of facts and videos from all over the internet.